You're listening to WEOP AM 730, the voice of inquiry. It's time for Echoes of Persuasion with your host, Colt Thornton.
There's a kind of question that sounds like it's asking for clarity, but isn't. Did you personally verify it? Did you see it yourself? On the surface, that sounds like skepticism doing its job. A refusal to take things on faith, a demand for certainty. But if you sit with it long enough, something else begins to emerge. Because that question doesn't just challenge claims. It quietly redraws the boundaries of what's allowed to be known. And over time, that boundary starts to close in. Good evening. I'm Colt Thornton, and you're listening to Echoes of Persuasion. When personal experience becomes the only acceptable standard, knowledge shrinks to the size of a single life. Not because the world is simple, but because complexity requires cooperation. It requires comparison, correction, and continuity across people and time. And once those things are dismissed, the horizon pulls closer. What remains feels solid, certain, and safe. Inside that narrowed space, skepticism stops functioning as a tool and starts functioning as a shield. Beliefs aren't tested, they're protected. Disagreement isn't informative, it's disqualifying. And that shift matters. Because skepticism, at its best, is outward-facing. It presses against claims. It welcomes friction. It treats uncertainty as an invitation. But skepticism, turned inward, does something different. It becomes identity. When knowing is reduced to what I personally experienced, the self becomes the final authority. Not because it earned that role, but because nothing else is permitted to challenge it. That can feel empowering at first. It feels independent, untethered, immune to manipulation. But independence has a cost. The cost is isolation. Once shared methods are dismissed, correction becomes impossible without feeling like an attack. Learning becomes repetition, and certainty starts to substitute for understanding, not because it's stronger, but because it's quieter. There's less to wrestle with, less to revise, less to let go of. And here's the quiet irony. A rule designed to protect people from deception often ends up protecting beliefs from contact. The very standard meant to keep claims accountable slowly removes accountability altogether. At that point, the question isn't whether someone personally verified something. The question is whether the rule itself allows for growth. Because a worldview that can only be defended by shrinking what counts as knowledge eventually runs out of room. And when that happens, certainty doesn't signal strength, it signals closure. That's not a judgment, it's an observation. Persuasion doesn't always change minds by adding beliefs. Sometimes it works by subtracting options, until only one way of seeing the world still fits. And once you notice that happening, you start hearing certain questions differently. Not as challenges, but as doors quietly closing. This isn't about answers. It's about noticing when a question stops inviting them. Join me next time for another episode of Echoes of Persuasion. And always remember, the echoes fade, but persuasion never sleeps.